It all began in the space between heartbeats, that infinite moment when the body forgets to breathe and the soul remembers it was never meant to stay. Marcus Webb had never been afraid of dying. At 47, he'd faced enough close calls to know that fear was just noise the mind made when it forgot what really mattered. He was a mechanic in a town called Silver Creek, Montana, population 847, give or take whoever was visiting for the weekend. His shop sat at the edge of town, a grease-stained cathedral where engines were resurrected and transmissions found redemption. Marcus lived alone, had been that way for 6 years, since the divorce. Linda had wanted more than what a small-town mechanic could provide. More excitement, more money, more of something he could never quite name. She'd moved to Seattle with their daughter, Emma, who was now 15, and called once a month if he was lucky. The conversations were brief, punctuated by long silences that said more than words ever could. But Marcus didn't complain. He had his work, his coffee, and the mountains that surrounded Silver Creek like ancient guardians. He had the satisfaction of fixing what was broken, of bringing dead things back to life. It was enough, or so he told himself, during the long nights when the shop was quiet and the loneliness pressed in like fog. December 17th started like any other winter day, cold, grey, the kind of morning where your breath crystallized in front of you and the sun seemed reluctant to rise. Marcus was alone in the shop, working on a 1972 Chevy pickup that had been sitting in the corner for 3 months. The owner had died, heart attack, and his widow wanted it fixed before selling it. Something about closure, she'd said. Marcus understood closure. He'd been chasing it himself for 6 years. He was underneath the truck, wrestling with a stubborn oil pan bolt when it happened. A sharp pain exploded in his chest, sudden, overwhelming, like someone had reached inside and squeezed his heart with an iron fist. Marcus gasped, the wrench falling from his hand, clattering on the concrete floor. He tried to move to crawl out from under the truck, but his body wouldn't obey. The pain intensified, spread, consumed. His vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping in like spilled ink. He tried to call out, but no sound came, just the harsh rasp of his own breathing growing shallower with each second. This is it, he thought with strange clarity. This is how it ends. Alone under a dead man's truck. But Marcus was wrong about something. He wasn't alone at all. The darkness took him completely. No tunnel of light, no life flashing before his eyes. Just darkness so absolute it felt like being erased from existence. And then, in that void, something shifted. He was no longer under the truck, no longer in his body. No longer, he realized with dawning awareness, in the world he'd known for 47 years. Marcus stood, or perhaps floated. The distinction seemed meaningless here, in a space that defied description. It wasn't dark or light, wasn't up or down, it simply was. And in that indefinable somewhere, he was not alone. The being stood before him, if standing was even the right word. It was tall, perhaps 7 feet, with proportions that suggested humanity but transcended it. Its form seemed to shift slightly, as if Marcus's mind couldn't quite hold the full reality of what he was seeing. The being emitted a soft luminescence, not quite light, but something more fundamental, as if consciousness itself had taken visible form. Marcus should have been terrified. Every instinct should have been screaming, but instead, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace, recognition even, though he'd never seen anything like this being in his entire life. The being didn't speak, not with words, but Marcus heard it nonetheless. Thoughts appearing in his mind fully formed, complete with nuance and emotion that language could never capture. Welcome home, Marcus Webb. Home. The word resonated through him like a bell, but this wasn't home. Home was Silver Creek. Home was his shop, his apartment above it, the diner on Main Street where he ate breakfast every Sunday. This was something else entirely. You have died, the being communicated. Your heart stopped 11 minutes ago, but you are not finished. 11 minutes. Marcus processed that. 11 minutes of his body lying on cold concrete alone, while his consciousness had traveled where? Heaven? Another dimension? He didn't know what to call this place. Names are limiting. The being responded to his unspoken thought. This is the between, the space that exists in the pause between endings and beginnings. Marcus tried to speak, found he could project thoughts just as the being did. Am I dead? Really dead? Your body is dying. Your heart has stopped. But you are more than your body. You are discovering this now. Then why am I here? Why not? Heaven? Hell? Wherever people are supposed to go? The being's luminosity pulsed, and Marcus felt something like gentle amusement emanate from it. Those places exist, but not as you imagine. They are states of consciousness, not geographic locations. You are here because you have questions, because your journey is not yet complete, because I have things to show you before you choose. Choose what? Whether to return, whether to continue, whether to finally understand what you've been running from your entire life. Marcus felt something twist in his chest, or whatever passed for a chest in this formless state. Running from. He wasn't running from anything. He was just living, getting by, making it through each day. You have been asleep, Marcus Webb. The being communicated, and now there was profound compassion in the transmission. Most humans are. It is not a judgment. It is simply a fact. You incarnate, you forget. You spend your lives chasing shadows and calling them substance. But every so often someone is given the opportunity to remember, to see, to choose differently. And that's why you're here, to help me remember. I am here because you called. All souls call when they reach this threshold. Some of us answer. What are you? Marcus asked. The question he'd been avoiding finally surfacing. The being was silent for a long moment. Then images began to flow into Marcus's consciousness. Not words, but pure understanding. He saw civilizations rising and falling on worlds whose names existed only as frequencies. He saw beings of pure consciousness shepherding younger species through their evolution. He saw a universe teeming with life, with intelligence, with souls all walking their own paths toward the same ultimate destination. I am what you might call a guide, the being finally answered. A teacher, a shepherd of souls. I have walked the path you are walking. I have been human as you are human, and I have become something more. An angel. If that word helps you understand, yes. Though angels, as your religions describe them, are both more and less than the reality. We are not servants of a distant God. We are expressions of the divine, as you are. We simply remember what we are. You have forgotten. Marcus absorbed this, his mind reeling. If he'd had a body, he would have been dizzy. But here, in this between place, there was only the vertigo of comprehension, of understanding things that should have been impossible to grasp. I'm going to show you something, the being communicated. It will be difficult, painful even, but it is necessary if you are to choose wisely. Before Marcus could respond, the space around them transformed. He was no longer in the formless between. He was somewhere else, everywhere else. He saw Earth from a distance, the blue marble floating in cosmic darkness. But he saw more than the physical planet. He saw the web of consciousness that surrounded it, billions of lights, each one a human soul, interconnected in ways they didn't consciously realize. The web pulsed with emotion, love, fear, joy, suffering, all of it blending together into a symphony of human experience. But something was wrong. Parts of the web were dimming, disconnecting, growing cold. Your species is at a crossroads, the being explained. You stand on the edge of transformation or extinction. Not physical extinction, that is the least of concerns, but spiritual extinction, the death of the soul while the body still lives. Marcus watched as the web grew more fragmented. He saw humans isolating themselves, building walls of fear and judgment. He saw how technology that should have connected them was instead being used to deepen separation. He saw the rise of ideologies that turned neighbor against neighbor, brother against sister. He saw a species forgetting the fundamental truth that they were all one consciousness experiencing itself through billions of perspectives. This is the great forgetting, the being communicated. It happens to every species that reaches your level of development. Some remember in time, some do not. What happens to those who don't remember? The being showed him. Marcus saw civilizations collapsing inward, consuming themselves through conflict and division. Not dramatic explosions or alien invasions, but slow entropy, the gradual dimming of collective consciousness until only darkness remained. Souls so lost in separation that they forgot they were capable of connection. Worlds where beings still walked and talked and went through the motions of existence, but the light behind their eyes had gone out. It was the most horrifying thing Marcus had ever witnessed. Not death, but something worse. Living death. Consciousness eating itself alive. Is that what's happening to us? Marcus asked, horror flooding through him. To Earth, it is happening, but it is not yet inevitable. There is still time, still choice. That is why beings like me come, why we reach out to souls like yours who stand at the threshold, because one awakened consciousness can spark others. One light remembered can illuminate the darkness. But I'm nobody, Marcus protested. I'm just a mechanic in a town nobody's heard of. What difference could I possibly make? The being's luminosity intensified, and Marcus felt the full weight of its attention focus on him. You believe you are small because you have forgotten what you are. Let me show you. The vision shifted again, and Marcus found himself looking at himself, but not as he knew himself. He saw his life from the outside, watching moments he'd forgotten or never realized were significant. He saw a day 15 years ago when a young man had come into his shop, desperate. His car had broken down, he had no money, and he needed to get to Denver for his mother's surgery. Marcus had fixed the car for free and sent him on his way. Marcus watched as the young man made it to Denver in time, watched him hold his mother's hand through recovery, watched as 5 years later that young man opened a free clinic in a poor neighborhood, remembering the kindness a stranger had shown him. Marcus watched the ripples spread outward, every person helped by that clinic, every life touched by that doctor who had learned that compassion could change the world, all because Marcus had chosen kindness on a random Tuesday afternoon. The being showed him more. The widow whose husband's truck he'd been working on when his heart stopped, Marcus saw her future, saw how selling that restored truck would give her enough money to visit her son across the country, saw the reconciliation that visit would spark, healing a 10-year rift, saw the grandchild who would be born from that reconciliation, who would grow up to become a teacher, touching hundreds of young lives, all connected to Marcus's work, his care, his attention to detail in restoring a dead man's truck. You see, the being communicated. There are no small acts, no meaningless lives. Every choice you make sends ripples through the fabric of reality. Every moment of kindness or cruelty shapes the web of consciousness. You are not separate from the whole, Marcus Webb. You are the whole, experiencing itself through the lens of one lifetime. Marcus felt tears he didn't have streaming down a face he no longer possessed. He'd spent so much of his life believing he didn't matter, that his small-town existence was somehow less meaningful than the lives of people in cities, people with important careers, people who made headlines. He'd carried the quiet shame of ordinariness like a stone in his chest, but he saw now that he'd been wrong, completely, devastatingly wrong. This is what Jesus tried to teach, the being continued, and the name resonated through the between like a struck chord. That the kingdom of heaven is not somewhere else. It is here now, in every interaction, in every choice to see the divine in another person, in every act of love, no matter how small. Jesus, Marcus repeated, the concept strange in this place. Was he like you? He was human, as you are human, but he remembered fully what he was. He awakened completely, and in that awakening, he became a bridge between human and divine, showing others the path, not through worship, but through emulation. Follow me, he said, not worship me. The distinction matters. Marcus saw then, in a flash of understanding, the man who would later be called Christ, saw him not as the untouchable God figure of paintings and prayers, but as a person who had fought with doubt, struggled with fear, wrestled with his own humanity while remembering his divinity, saw him choosing love again and again, even when it led to suffering, especially when it led to suffering. The resurrection was not about proving he was special, the being explained. It was about proving that death is not the end, that consciousness continues, that love transcends all boundaries, even the boundary between life and death. He showed you what was possible, what all of you are capable of. But people worship him now, Marcus thought. They've made him into something unreachable. Yes, it is easier to worship than to transform, easier to make someone else divine than to recognize your own divinity. But the time for that comfortable distance is ending. Your species must choose. Remember or forget. Awaken or sleep. Transform or decay. The transformation you keep mentioning, what is it exactly? The being paused, and Marcus sensed it was choosing how to communicate something vast in terms a human consciousness could grasp. Your species stands at the threshold of a shift in consciousness. Some call it the rapture. Some call it ascension. Some call it the apocalypse, though they misunderstand what that word truly means. Apocalypse, unveiling, revelation, the removal of the veil that separates human from divine. When? It is already happening, has been happening, will continue to happen. Time is not linear, except in your current perception. The shift occurs gradually, then suddenly, like ice melting. Nothing, 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 then collapse. Some humans are already awakening, others resist. The choice is individual, but the consequences are collective. Marcus absorbed this, trying to grasp implications that seemed too vast for his mind to hold. A global awakening, a transformation of consciousness. It sounded like science fiction, like religious fantasy. And yet standing here in this between place, communicating with a being of light, he couldn't dismiss it. What about those who don't choose to awaken? What happens to them? The being's luminosity dimmed slightly, and Marcus felt profound sadness emanate from it. They continue as they are, trapped in cycles of fear and separation until they are ready to choose differently. There is no punishment, Marcus. No hell except the one humans create through their own resistance to love. But there is stagnation. Souls who refuse to grow, who cling to old patterns, who choose fear over love again and again until they forget that choice was ever possible. That sounds like hell to me. Yes, and it is entirely self-created. The divine never condemns, only invites, always invites, but the invitation can only be accepted by those willing to see it. Marcus thought of his own life, his isolation, his going through the motions existence, his careful avoidance of anything that might require vulnerability or change. He'd been proud of his self-sufficiency, his ability to need nothing from anyone, but now he saw it for what it was: fear dressed up as strength, the refusal to connect because connection meant risk, the choice to sleep because waking might hurt. You're starting to understand, the being communicated gently. This is why you are here. This is why your heart stopped at precisely this moment. You were given a choice, Marcus Webb. You can return to your body, your life, your carefully constructed fortress of ordinariness, or you can stay here, cross over completely, let go. What would you choose? Marcus asked. I cannot choose for you, but I will tell you this. Your work is not finished. Your daughter needs you, though she doesn't know it yet. The people of Silver Creek need you, though they don't recognize it. The web of consciousness needs every awakened soul it can gather. You matter more than you know. But I'm afraid, Marcus admitted, the truth finally surfacing. I don't know how to be what you're describing. I don't know how to be awake. You don't have to know. You only have to choose. The knowing comes through doing, through living with open eyes and an open heart, through choosing love when fear seems safer, through connecting when isolation seems easier, through remembering, moment by moment, that you are not separate. You never were. Marcus felt something shift within him, a decision forming before his conscious mind could fully articulate it. He wanted to go back, not because he was afraid of death, but because he finally understood that his life, his ordinary, small-town, fixing engines life, mattered, that he had been given a gift, the opportunity to serve, to connect, to help other souls remember what they'd forgotten. I want to return, he thought clearly. I want to try. The being's luminosity intensified until it filled everything, and Marcus felt what could only be described as joy radiating from it. Then return you shall. But Marcus Webb, you will not return unchanged. You have seen behind the veil. You have remembered, if only for these 11 minutes, what you truly are. That knowledge will stay with you, though it may feel dreamlike in the days to come. Trust it. Follow it. Let it guide you. Will I see you again? You see me always. I am in every act of kindness you witness, every sunset that takes your breath away, every moment of connection between souls. I am not separate from you, Marcus. I never was. None of us are separate. That is the great truth, the only truth that matters. The between began to fade, and Marcus felt himself being pulled backward, downward, inward, back toward the cold concrete floor and the silent shop and the body that had been lying empty for 11 minutes. But before he fully returned, the being communicated one final message. Tell them, Marcus Webb, not with words, but with your life. Show them that death is not the end, that love transcends all boundaries, that we are all connected, all divine, all capable of so much more than we remember. Show them by how you live, by who you become, by the choices you make in the 1,000 small moments that comprise a life. And when you face your own doubts, and you will, remember this: you died today. You crossed the threshold. You met me here in the between, and you chose to return. That choice changes everything. You cannot unknow what you now know. You can only decide what to do with it. Then Marcus was falling, tumbling through darkness that gave way to suffocating weight. He gasped, his lungs burning as air rushed in. His chest exploded with pain as his heart stuttered, stopped, started again. Every nerve in his body screamed as consciousness slammed back into physical form. He opened his eyes to fluorescent lights and concerned faces. EMTs, he realized dimly. Someone had found him, called 911. How long had it been? He tried to speak, but his throat was raw from the intubation tube they'd inserted. One of the EMTs, a young woman with kind eyes, leaned over him. Mr. Webb, can you hear me? You're okay. You're alive. Your heart stopped for 11 minutes, but we got you back. You're going to be okay. 11 minutes, just as the being had said. 11 minutes of death, 11 minutes in the between. 11 minutes that had changed everything. Marcus closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face, and sent a silent prayer of gratitude into the universe. Not to some distant God, but to the web of consciousness that connected all things, to the being of light who had shown him truth. To whatever force had decided he wasn't finished yet, he had been given a second chance, and this time he would not waste it sleeping. The hospital room was too white, too sterile, too much of everything except what Marcus needed it to be, a place where he could process what had happened without concerned faces and beeping machines, reminding him that he was supposed to be grateful to be alive. But gratitude wasn't the problem. Marcus was grateful, profoundly so. The problem was that everyone kept talking about how lucky he was, how it was a miracle the mail carrier had stopped by the shop to drop off a package and found him, how the EMTs arrived in record time, how his heart, against all odds, had restarted after 11 minutes. They called it luck, coincidence, medical intervention. They didn't understand that it had been none of those things. It had been choice, his choice to return, the being's gift of showing him why returning mattered. The cardiologist, Dr. Reeves, had explained it all in careful medical terms. Cardiac arrest, ventricular fibrillation, significant oxygen deprivation to the brain, though miraculously no apparent damage. They wanted to keep him for observation, run more tests, fit him with a cardiac monitor, standard procedure for someone who'd been clinically dead for 11 minutes. Marcus agreed to everything because it was easier than trying to explain what had actually happened. How do you tell a cardiologist that you'd met a being of light in a place called the Between, that you'd been shown the web of consciousness connecting all humanity, that you'd understood, with crystal clarity, that death was not an ending, but a transition? You didn't. You nodded and took your medications and let them run their tests. You kept the truth tucked away like a secret treasure, waiting for the right moment to let it shine. His second night in the hospital, Marcus couldn't sleep. The morphine they'd given him for the chest pain had worn off, leaving him alert despite the late hour. He lay in the darkness, listening to the rhythmic beep of his heart monitor, proof that he was alive, that his choice in the Between had manifested in this reality. He thought about the being's final message, that he would return changed, that the knowledge would stay with him, though it might feel dreamlike. Already, less than 48 hours later, he could feel it happening. The details were becoming harder to grasp, like trying to hold water in his hands, but the essence remained, the feeling, the knowing. He was not alone. He had never been alone. None of them were. That understanding pulsed through him like a second heartbeat, steady and undeniable. He thought of all the years he'd spent in self-imposed isolation, believing his solitude was strength, how wrong he'd been, how much time he'd wasted. A nurse came in to check his vitals, a different one from the day shift. She was older, probably close to retirement, with tired eyes and gentle hands. As she adjusted his IV, Marcus found himself really looking at her, not just seeing but looking, the way the being had taught him. He saw the exhaustion she carried, the weight of decades spent caring for others while neglecting herself, the quiet grief of a recent loss, a parent perhaps, or a sibling. He saw all of this not through psychic vision, but through simple attention, through actually seeing another human being instead of treating her as background noise in his own story. Long shift? Marcus asked quietly. She glanced at him, surprised. Most patients were asleep at this hour, or if awake, focused only on their own discomfort. Double shift, she admitted. We're short-staffed. Holiday season and flu season hitting at the same time. That's hard. Thank you for being here. Something in her expression softened. That's kind of you to say. Most people don't think about it. She paused, her hands stilling on his chart. Can I tell you something? I've been a nurse for 32 years. I've seen hundreds of cardiac arrest cases. Most who are down as long as you are don't make it back. And those who do, usually there's brain damage, significant damage. But I'm fine, Marcus said. No damage at all, Dr. Reeves said. I know, that's what I'm saying. It's not normal, it's not... She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. It's not medical. I've seen miracles in this job. Real miracles, not just lucky outcomes. And Mr. Webb, what happened to you? That was a miracle. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Do you believe in miracles? I believe there are more things in heaven and earth than we understand. I believe that sometimes, when someone comes back from the other side, they come back with something, a purpose, a message, a gift. She looked at him directly. You came back for a reason. I can see it in your eyes. They're different, clearer, like you've seen something the rest of us haven't. Marcus held her gaze. This woman, this exhausted nurse at the end of a double shift, had seen what no one else had recognized the change in him. And in that recognition, he felt the being's presence, that reminder that guides could appear in any form, that truth could be spoken through any willing voice. "Thank you," he said, meaning it on more levels than she could know. She patted his hand. "Get some rest, Mr. Webb. Something tells me you have work to do when you get out of here." She was right. He did. Marcus was discharged 3 days later with a prescription for medications he'd need to take the rest of his life, a list of dietary restrictions, and instructions to follow up with a cardiologist in 2 weeks. His shop foreman, Pete, picked him up from the hospital. Pete was 63, had worked for Marcus for 15 years, and was one of the few people in Silver Creek Marcus considered something close to a friend. The drive back to town was quiet. Pete wasn't much of a talker, which Marcus had always appreciated, but now in his post-between state, the silence felt different, not comfortable but heavy with things unsaid. Pete kept glancing at him, worry evident in the lines around his eyes. "You can ask," Marcus said finally. "Whatever you're wondering." Pete cleared his throat. "Doc says you were dead. 11 minutes. That's right. 11 minutes is a long time." "Yes." "Did you—" Pete struggled with the question. "Did you see anything? People always talk about tunnels of light and dead relatives. Any of that?" Marcus considered how to answer. The full truth was impossible to convey, but perhaps a partial truth would serve. "I saw enough to know we don't have to be afraid. Death isn't what we think it is." Pete absorbed this, his weathered hands tight on the steering wheel. "My wife died 6 years ago, cancer. I think about her every day. Wonder where she is. If she's okay. If she—" His voice cracked. "If she remembers me." Marcus felt his chest constrict, but not from cardiac issues, from compassion, from seeing clearly the grief Pete had carried in silence for 6 years, while Marcus had been too wrapped up in his own isolation to notice. "She remembers," Marcus said with absolute certainty. "And she's okay, more than okay. How do you know?" "Because I saw, not her specifically, but the place where people go, and Pete. It's not empty. It's not nothing. It's full of love, and light, and consciousness. She's there, waiting, but also not waiting, because time doesn't work the same way there. She's with you even now, in ways you probably don't recognize." Pete's eyes glistened. He pulled the truck over to the side of the road, put it in park, and sat there with his hands on the wheel, shoulders shaking. Marcus reached over and gripped his shoulder, saying nothing, just being present while Pete released 6 years of carefully contained grief. When Pete finally composed himself, he looked at Marcus with red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you. I needed to hear that. Even if you're just saying what you think I want to hear." "I'm not," Marcus interrupted. "I'm telling you what I know to be true. Your wife loved you, she loves you still. And one day you'll see her again. That's not faith or hope. That's fact." Pete nodded, wiping his eyes. "You're different, Marcus. Something happened to you over there." "Yeah, something did." They drove the rest of the way in silence, but it was a different silence now. Not empty, but full. The silence of understanding shared between two people who had both loved and lost and were learning, each in their own way, that loss was not the final word. Returning to his apartment above the shop felt strange. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. The dishes in the sink, the half-drunk coffee on the counter, the TV remote on the couch where he'd tossed it. But Marcus had changed so fundamentally that these familiar objects seemed alien. How had he lived like this? In such isolation, such carefully maintained disconnection. He spent his first night back sitting on the couch, not watching TV or drinking or doing any of the things he'd normally do, just sitting, feeling, paying attention to the sensations of being alive, the rise and fall of his chest, the beating of his heart, the awareness of consciousness inhabiting a physical form. It was mundane and miraculous at the same time. The next morning, Marcus defied doctor's orders and went down to the shop, not to work on engines, he wasn't cleared for that yet, but to be there, to see Pete and the other mechanics, to be part of the world instead of hiding from it. Pete tried to send him back upstairs, citing doctor's orders and insurance liability, but Marcus insisted on staying, promising he'd just sit in the office and do paperwork. What he actually did was watch. And in watching, he saw things he'd never noticed before. He saw how Tony, the youngest mechanic, was struggling, not with the work, but with something personal. Marcus saw it in the way Tony's hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking, in the way he startled at loud noises, in the haunted look that flashed across his face when he thought he was unobserved. Before the between, Marcus would have ignored it. None of his business. People had a right to their privacy. But now, with the being's words echoing in his mind, that every connection mattered, that every soul needed to be seen, he couldn't ignore it. During lunch break, Marcus approached Tony, who was sitting alone in his truck, eating a sandwich without really tasting it. Marcus knocked on the window. Tony jumped, then rolled it down, looking guilty though he'd done nothing wrong. "Hey, boss, I thought you were supposed to be resting." "I am resting, just watching you all work." Marcus paused. "Tony, can I ask you something?" "Sure. You doing okay? And I don't mean okay like the word we use when we don't want to talk. I mean, actually, okay." Tony's face went carefully neutral. "I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. Always have been. It's one of your better qualities, actually." A ghost of a smile crossed Tony's face, then vanished. "It's nothing. Just stuff at home." Marcus waited, the silence inviting without demanding. Tony broke first. "My dad, he
Has for
drinks.
years, but it's getting worse, and my mom, she won't leave him. She just takes it. And I'm supposed to what, stand by and watch?" "How old are you, Tony?" 23. "You still living at home?" "Can't afford my own place. Not in this town, not on what I make." Marcus made a decision then. One of those choices the being had talked about, the small moments that send ripples through reality. "The apartment next to mine is empty. Has been for 6 months. I own the building. You can have it, rent-free until you get on your feet." Tony stared. "Boss, I can't." "Yes, you can. And you will, because staying in a situation that's hurting you helps no one. Not you, not your mom, not even your dad. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is remove yourself from a toxic situation. It gives everyone space to make different choices. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Move in this weekend. And Tony, if you need to talk about any of it, I'm here. Really here. Not just your boss who signs your paychecks. Another human being who gives a damn." Tony's eyes filled. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Marcus patted the truck door and walked away, feeling the being's presence like warm light in his chest. This was it. This was the work. Not grand gestures or speeches, but small acts of kindness that shifted the trajectory of a life. That night, Marcus did something he'd been avoiding. He called his daughter. Emma answered on the 4th ring, her voice carefully neutral. "Hey, Dad. Hey, Em, how are you?" "Fine. You?" "Actually, I'm not fine. I need to tell you something." He heard her attention sharpen. In 15 years, he'd never said those words. Never admitted need. Never shown vulnerability. "What's wrong?" "I had a heart attack. Last week. Was dead for 11 minutes. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "What?" "I'm okay now. Recovering. But Em, it made me realize something. I've been a terrible father. Not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't know how to show it, didn't know how to be present. I let your mum leave and took you with her, and I just accepted it. Didn't fight, didn't try, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He heard her crying. Soft, muffled sounds she was trying to hide. "Dad, I know I can't fix 15 years in one phone call. I know I haven't earned the right to ask for another chance. But Em, if you're willing, I'd like to try. I'd like to be the father I should have been all along. Better late than never, maybe." "I thought you didn't care," she said, her voice breaking. "All these years I thought you were okay with us leaving, that you were relieved." "God, no. I was devastated. But I didn't know how to say it. Didn't think I had the right. Your mother was probably right to leave. I wasn't much of a husband, but I should have fought for you. Should have been more present. Should have been more." "I'd like that," Emma said. "To try again, I'd like that a lot." They talked for 2 hours, really talked, about her life, her school, her friends, about his shop, his near-death experience, his realization that life was too short to waste in isolation. They made plans. She would visit over Christmas break. 2 weeks, just the two of them, rebuilding what had been broken. When Marcus finally hung up, he sat in the darkness of his apartment and cried, not from sadness, but from gratitude, from the overwhelming understanding that he'd been given something precious, time, the chance to make different choices, to build instead of decay. The being had been right. His work wasn't finished. Over the following weeks, Marcus's transformation became visible to everyone in Silver Creek. It wasn't dramatic, no miracles or visions or speaking in tongues, just a man who had been asleep waking up, who had been closed opening, who had been afraid choosing love anyway. He started having Sunday dinners at the diner, inviting anyone who wanted to come. It began with just Pete and Tony, but word spread. Soon there were 10 people, then 15, then 20. People who'd been eating alone, living alone, suffering alone, suddenly had a place to gather, a table that welcomed everyone. Marcus reconnected with old friends he'd let drift away. He volunteered at the church, not because he'd suddenly become religious in the traditional sense, but because he understood that churches, at their best, were meant to be places of community, of connection. And Silver Creek's little Baptist church needed help with their food bank. He worked with the pastor, Reverend Matthews, distributing groceries to families struggling to make ends meet. The Reverend was initially skeptical of Marcus's sudden involvement.
He'd rarely seen him at services. But as they worked together week after week, the Reverend saw the change was genuine. One day, while sorting donations, Reverend Matthews asked the question he'd been holding. "What happened to you, Marcus? And please don't say nothing. I've been doing this long enough to recognize a genuine conversion when I see one." Marcus considered his answer carefully. "I died, briefly, and on the other side, I met someone who showed me things, true things, about connection and love and what really matters. An angel? Maybe. Or an alien. Or a manifestation of my own higher consciousness. Does it matter what we call it?" The Reverend smiled. "No, I suppose it doesn't. Though I will say, whatever happened to you, it's brought you closer to the heart of Christ than most lifelong Christians I know." "How so?" "Because you're living it instead of just believing it. Loving people instead of just talking about love. Seeing the divine in everyone instead of dividing the world into saved and damned. That's what Jesus actually taught, you know. Not the religion we built around him, but what he actually said and did." Marcus thought about the being's words, that Jesus had been a precursor, a guide showing the way, that the point wasn't to worship him but to become like him, to awaken fully to divine consciousness and live from that place. "Can I ask you something, Reverend?" "Honest question." "Of course. Do you really believe only Christians go to heaven? That everyone else, Buddhists, Muslims, atheists, people who never heard of Jesus, they're all damned?" Reverend Matthews was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Honestly? No. I think God is bigger than our boxes. I think truth wears many faces and speaks many languages. I think Jesus was showing us one path to the divine, but not necessarily the only path. That'll get me in trouble with some of my congregation, but it's what I believe. Then why stay Christian? Why not just be spiritual? Because traditions matter, communities matter. Having a shared language to talk about the ineffable matters. Christianity at its best is a vehicle for transformation. The problem is we've often confused the vehicle for the destination. But Marcus, what you're experiencing, that's the destination. And it doesn't matter how you got there." That conversation stayed with Marcus. He began to see his own experience not as something that contradicted Christianity, but as something that deepened it. The being hadn't told him Jesus was wrong. It had told him that Jesus was showing the way. That resurrection and ascension weren't supernatural miracles, but demonstrations of what consciousness could become when it fully awakened. Christmas came. Emma arrived on a snowy December afternoon, nervous and hopeful in equal measure. Marcus picked her up from the bus station, and for a moment they just stood there, father and daughter who'd become strangers, trying to figure out how to bridge the gap. Then Emma stepped forward and hugged him, hard, and Marcus hugged back, tears streaming down his face, understanding in his bones what the being had meant about love transcending all boundaries. His daughter was here. He'd been given this chance. Nothing else mattered. They spent 2 weeks rediscovering each other. Marcus showed her his shop, his town, the mountains he'd loved his whole life. Emma told him about her dreams. She wanted to be a veterinarian. About her struggles, kids at school who bullied her. About her fears, that she wasn't good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. And Marcus listened, really listened, not planning what to say next or offering solutions, just being present, witnessing her, seeing her. It was the greatest gift he'd ever given anyone. On Christmas Eve, they attended the candlelight service at Reverend Matthews's church. Emma had never been particularly religious. Linda had left that behind when she left Montana. But she'd agreed to go because it mattered to Marcus, or rather because Marcus mattered to her, and she wanted to share what he loved. The service was simple. Carols sung off-key by a small congregation, a sermon about light in darkness. The lighting of candles that spread from person to person until the whole church glowed. But as Marcus stood there, candle in hand, daughter beside him, something extraordinary happened. For just a moment, the veil thinned. He saw the web again, that interconnected consciousness linking everyone in the church, in the town, in the world. He saw how each small light contributed to the whole, how no single flame was insignificant, how together they created something brighter than any individual could achieve alone. And standing at the front of the church, near the altar, Marcus saw the being, just for a heartbeat, a shimmer of light that could have been a trick of the candles, or could have been something more. The being's presence filled him with warmth, with approval, with love that transcended words. "You're doing the work," he felt more than heard. "You're remembering. Keep going." Then it was gone, and Marcus was just a man in a small-town church on Christmas Eve, holding a candle and his daughter's hand. But he was smiling, because he understood now. The being hadn't left. It had never left. It was here, in the light and the love and the connection. In every moment he chose to see the divine instead of the mundane.
After the service, standing outside in the snow, Emma looked up at him. "Dad, are you okay? You seem, I don't know, different." "I am different," Marcus admitted. "I died, remember? And when you die, even briefly, you see things differently when you come back." "What did you see? When you were gone?" Marcus looked up at the stars, remembering the between, the being, the web of consciousness, the fundamental truth that they were all connected, all divine, all capable of so much more than they remembered. "I saw that love is real," he said simply, "that we're all connected, that death isn't the end, that every choice we make matters, that we're all much more than we think we are." Emma was quiet, processing. "Then, I believe you. I don't know why, but I do. That's enough. Belief is just the beginning. Living it is what matters." They stood in the snow, father and daughter, breathing in the cold Montana air and looking up at stars that were more than balls of gas and light. That were, Marcus now understood, other consciousnesses, other expressions of the divine experiencing itself through different forms. Emma returned to Seattle after New Year's, but something had shifted between them. They talked regularly now, not the stilted, obligatory calls of before, but real conversations. She told him she was struggling with a friend who'd betrayed her. Marcus helped her see that forgiveness wasn't about condoning the betrayal, but about freeing herself from the poison of resentment. She called crying after failing a chemistry test. Marcus reminded her that failure was just information, not identity, that she was more than her grades, more than her achievements, more than anything external could define. Week by week, call by call, they rebuilt their relationship, and Marcus saw the ripples spreading. Emma became more confident, started standing up to bullies, made new friends, began to see herself as worthy of love because her father had finally shown up and shown her she was. The being had been right. No act of love was too small. Every connection mattered. Spring came to Silver Creek. The snow melted, revealing the brown earth and the promise of green things to come. Marcus's health had stabilized. His heart, scarred but functional, kept beating. The medications helped. So did the changes he'd made. Eating better, walking daily, reducing stress. But more than any physical intervention, it was the purpose he'd found that kept him alive. He had work to do, people to see, connections to build, love to share. One warm April morning, Marcus was walking through town when he saw a young woman sitting on a bench crying. He'd seen her before. She worked at the grocery store, but he'd never really looked at her. Now, with his awakened eyes, he saw the pain she carried, the desperation, the kind of darkness that spoke of someone at the end of their rope. Before the between, he would have walked past. Not my business. Don't intrude. But now he understood that every suffering person was his business. That turning away from pain was turning away from an opportunity to serve, to connect, to love. He sat down next to her, keeping a respectful distance. "Rough day." She looked at him through tears, startled. Yeah, sorry. I'm fine. It's okay not to be fine. Most of us aren't most of the time. We just pretend better." She let out a choked laugh. "That's the truth." Then, as if the dam had broken, "I'm pregnant, 20 years old, pregnant, and the father wants nothing to do with it. My parents will kill me. I can't afford a baby. I can't afford anything. I don't know what to do." Marcus sat with her pain for a moment. Then, "Can I tell you what I think?" She nodded. "I think you're stronger than you know. I think this situation, as scary as it is, doesn't define you. You have choices. Whatever you decide, keep the baby, adoption, abortion, it's your choice, no one else's. And there are people who will support you no matter what you decide." "Who?" "My parents won't. My friends have all disappeared. Me, for one. I'm Marcus. I own the auto shop on 4th Street, and I'm not asking for anything. I'm just offering help if you need it. A ride to appointments, someone to talk to. Practical support if you decide to keep the baby. A listening ear if you need to figure out what you want." She stared at him. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." "Because someone did something similar for me once, showed me kindness when I needed it most, and because I've learned that we're all connected. Your pain is my pain. Your joy is my joy. That's just how it works." Her name was Sarah. Over the following months, Marcus became one of her strongest supports. He connected her with resources, went with her to prenatal appointments when she had no one else, sat with her when she told her parents and endured their anger and disappointment, helped her set up the tiny nursery in her apartment. When her daughter was born in July, Marcus was in the waiting room, and when Sarah asked him to be the baby's godfather, he accepted with tears in his eyes, not because of blood or obligation, but because love had woven them together into family. The baby, named Grace, became a regular fixture at the Sunday dinners.
So did Tony, who'd turned his life around and was talking about going to college. So did Pete, who'd started dating again after 6 years of grief. So did dozens of others. The lonely, the lost, the searching, the awakening. Silver Creek was changing, one person at a time, one connection at a time, one choice at a time, and Marcus understood that this was the transformation the being had spoken of. Not a dramatic ascension or rapture, but this slow, steady awakening, this gradual remembering of what they'd always been, this choosing of love over fear, connection over isolation, presence over escape. It was happening. The shift, the unveiling, the apocalypse in its truest sense, the revelation of what had always been true but forgotten. On the anniversary of his death, Marcus returned to the shop, to the exact spot where he'd collapsed under the truck. He stood there, feeling the cold concrete under his feet, remembering those 11 minutes that had changed everything. A year ago he'd died. A year ago he'd met the being. A year ago he'd chosen to return. And what a year it had been. How much had shifted. How many lives had been touched. How much love had been given and received. Marcus felt gratitude well up inside him, so strong it was almost painful. Gratitude for the heart attack that had killed him, for the 11 minutes in the between, for the being who had shown him truth, for the second chance he'd been given. He closed his eyes and sent a message out into the universe, to whatever forces might be listening, to the being, wherever it was, to the web of consciousness connecting all things. Thank you for everything, for the lesson, for the return, for the chance to serve. I'm using it, I promise. I'm living what you showed me. And I'll keep doing it until this heart finally stops for good. And in the silence of the shop, Marcus felt a response. Not words, but a sensation. Warmth, approval, love. You are seen. You are loved. You are exactly where you need to be. Marcus opened his eyes, smiling. He had work to do. A dinner to organize, people to see, a goddaughter to visit, a daughter to call, a life to live with open eyes and an open heart. The being had shown him the way. Now, it was up to him to walk it. One step at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time, until everyone remembered what they'd forgotten, until the whole web awakened, until the transformation was complete, and it would be complete. Marcus knew that now. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. Because consciousness always moved toward growth, always moved toward love, always moved toward reunion. The caterpillars were dissolving. The butterflies were emerging. And Marcus Crow, ordinary mechanic from Silver Creek, Montana, was privileged to witness it, to participate in it, to serve it. He was no longer alone. None of them were. And in that understanding lay everything. Perhaps heaven had never been somewhere else. Perhaps it had always been here, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be recognized. Perhaps Jesus and Buddha and all the great teachers had been saying the same thing in different languages. Wake up. Remember. Love. Perhaps death wasn't the enemy but the teacher. Perhaps suffering wasn't meaningless but the catalyst for growth. Perhaps everything, every pain, every loss, every moment of darkness was part of the journey home. Marcus didn't have all the answers. He didn't need them. All he needed was to keep showing up, keep choosing love, keep being present, keep building bridges between souls. The rest would take care of itself, because the universe was not indifferent. Consciousness was not accidental. Love was not weakness. They were, all of them, exactly what the being had said. Divine expressions experiencing themselves through temporary forms, sparks of infinite consciousness, wearing skin and bone and blood, immortal souls playing at mortality until they remembered the truth. And Marcus? He'd been given a glimpse behind the curtain. 11 minutes in the between. One encounter with a being of light. One choice to return. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Truth or fiction? Perhaps not even the storyteller knows. Here, stories exist to touch and make you reflect. The magical reveals itself only to those who allow themselves to feel, not to those who insist on seeking certainties.